surprise, this isn't a surprise. Still important because he's going to face off against Markus Söder, likely against Markus Söder from the sister CSU party out of Bavaria. But, Kayleigh, in terms of gigantic national news, I don't think this is as big as Hideki Matsuyama winning the Masters yesterday.
Yeah, I think people are probably a little bit more excited in Japan today. The first Japanese person to ever win a major golf tournament. It was really exciting to watch over the weekend, and especially when he put on that green jacket. It was quite a moment, and you know that a lot of Japanese are celebrating this victory today, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait till Suga comes to the White House on Friday. Biden will certainly congratulate him on winning what I consider to be the greatest sporting event in the world. Coming up, Klaus Regling from the European Stability Mechanism. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance Early Edition. I'm Kayleigh Lines in New York with Matt Miller in Berlin. Francine Lacqua is out at the pub today because the UK is reopening. Matt, we're following news there. We're also following news in Germany. The CDU officially backing Laschet. Now we're awaiting what the CSU is going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say I'd rather be at the pub. I was looking for reservations at the Ivy, found nothing. At Annabelle's, no tables left. Soho House, completely booked out. So I don't know where I would go if I were in the UK. You got to be in a place that has outdoor space, right? Here in Germany, there was really nowhere else to go for the CDU except for Armin Laschet. They have kind of backed themselves into a corner in a sense. He's their candidate, like it or not. Their sister party down in Bavaria Bavaria, the CSU, has a far more popular candidate in Markus Söder. The question is, will the CSU back him? We'll find out in a couple of hours. And then tomorrow, if they do, there's going to be a head-to-head in the Bundestag. The caucus will decide who gets to ultimately represent the CDU-CSU bloc. Typically, it's the much bigger CDU candidate, but Franz Josef Strauss famously represented the bloc out of Bavaria decades ago, and a lot of people will be talking about Strauss if Söder gets the win.
Yep, so we'll be tracking all of those developments as they come. But first, I want to get a quick check on the markets, because after record highs reached in the U.S. to end last week, it is a risk-off tone today. It really started with risk-off in the Asian session. European stocks following Asian stocks lower. We're down about 0.25% on the stock 600 at this point. So not a huge move, but still, it is definitely a down day. And S&P 500, of course, crossed that 4,100 threshold on Friday. Today, E-mini futures off by 7 points. We're not getting a lot of movement, though, in the bond market. The 10-year Treasury yield is literally flat. We're sitting at 1.65% ahead of $38 billion in supply coming online at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be watching to see what the takedown of that is. And I wanted to note Bitcoin as well. Right around its all-time high, just about $1,000 or so shy of it. It is above $60,000 once again. So a lot of eyes now on the crypto space. But what else is new? I'm always watching Bitcoin. As for some movers in pre-market trading, there were a couple outsides that I did want to note. Nuance Communications surging almost 20% before the bell. Microsoft apparently set to buy the company for around $56 a share. Right now, it's just about $2 shy of that in early trading. Marathon Patent Digital Holdings, of course, is a stock tied to cryptocurrency. With Bitcoin above 60,000, that is aiding the stock. It's up about 8% in pre-market trading. I did want to note Alibaba as well. It was one of the outperformers in the Asian session after a $2.8 billion fine from China, but it removes some of that regulatory overhang, and the ADRs here in the U.S. up 6%. In pre-market trading, also up 6% is CureVac. On Friday, a German newspaper reporting the company expects it to get EU approval for its COVID vaccine by May. So that is lifting sentiment. Those shares up around 6% before the bell, Matt.
I got to tell you, there was a time, I covered Bitcoin from the very early stages, and there was a time when it fell down to 250, even less. Joe Weisenthal said, hey, you're going to back up the truck, and I thought it would be journalistically unethical for me to buy a ton of this asset and then continue to cover it. But had I known it was going to go to 60,000, I may have made a different decision, Kaylee. Take a look at this chart that I have before I get myself in trouble. For our listeners on radio, this shows, once again, debt to GDP. And the numbers are huge if you look at a lot of European countries. Dan Curtis rearranged this to show the big economies in Europe. Italy, 154% debt to GDP. France and Spain, 115% debt to GDP. But the Netherlands and Germany have a lot of room to maneuver. 70% for Germany, 55% to the Netherlands. They could borrow a ton more and still would be fine. And that's what I want to talk about right now with Klaus Regling. He joins us from the European Stability Mechanism to talk about a number of issues. But one of the questions, Klaus, that we've been hearing today from investors is, when is Europe going to come out with more fiscal stimulus? It's really necessary. Do you agree?
No. And let me say that governments and international European institutions, and they all met in Washington last week at the IMF spring meeting in a virtual way. There were no such demands. They come from some people in the markets, only some, and from some journalists. Because when you look at what Europe has been doing, it's very, very impressive. And that was recognized by the IMF. The IMF revised up the growth numbers for Europe for this year, for instance, in its most recent World Economic Outlook. So there was a lot of praise for what Europe has been doing. Some like to compare the numbers Europe-US, but they are comparing apples and pears, I think, because the fiscal deficit, that's true, is jumping up a lot more in the US, which, by the way, also means that the debt levels in the US are higher than in almost all European countries now. But what is not taken into account is that...
Well, also the US moves a lot faster, Klaus. Right? The U.S. moves a heck of a lot faster. I mean, we just passed last month $1.9 trillion in stimulus. $1.2 trillion will be spent by September. Now, the EU...
That's only part of the story.
I'm listening.
I was going to tell you what's the other part of the story. The US started in 2019, before the pandemic, already with a huge deficit. So they had to jump to a much higher level.